This is the 50th state winning headlines, your media police post coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, from the Portal School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at some of the political pieces that we call cartoon in this country. Today is the 5th of May 2021, and I am 2M.
And I am GK.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Uhuru and Suluhu hit the reset button. In the Standard, end of the road for BBI change proponents. And in the Star, Raila moves to dismantle Orengo team.
Wow.
Yeah.
GK, kick us off.
So today I want to clarify a historical dynamic. Since Uhuru took oath of office during the first term, it could be argued that Uhuru was beholden to RUTO. In term 2, it is now RUTO that is beholden to Uhuru. RUTO needs Uhuru in order to become president. Fact.
Yes.
In fact, in an ideal world, RUTO would be relaxing in Karen right about now. Yeah. His running mate would have been created in a boardroom by Uhuru, and he would have accepted that choice at zero option.
Correct.
In this scenario, it wouldn't have mattered whether the Kikuyus were at the forefront or the backbench, united or divided. And this is because Uhuru has decided thus far something called the theory of the law of opposites. This is his philosophy that suggests that the only way you will ever achieve the success you desire to create in your life is to walk a different path to the masses.
Yes.
In other words, it means to do the opposite to the average person.
Yes.
To zig when others zag.
Yes.
Yeah.
So while RUTO has pandered to the masses, Uhuru has cut a solitary path. Even when the Kikuyu nation looked to have abandoned Uhuru, he knew it was nothing personal. They would be back.
Yes.
And indeed, they are back.
Oh, yes.
So RUTO had the opportunity to joyride this presidency and the power of incumbency. But instead, he dismantled the unity project that Uhuru Kenyatta had begun. RUTO also refused to practice tolerance. The same tolerance that Raila refused to practice in Kibaki's time.
Yes.
Earlier this week, I said that a good president learns how to compromise. And now I want to add that to become president, one must become as tolerant as Moi once was. I'll leave you with an old adage of former President Lyndon Johnson, which is, telling a man to go to hell is easy. Sending him there is much harder.
Yes.
Planning is easy. Execution of a plan is another matter altogether.
Beautiful.
Well put.
Beautiful. The season of betrayal is here with us. Baba has been betrayed by his generals and he has fired a warning shot. Uhuru was betrayed by RUTO and he has fired his warning shots. And many more are on the way. We want to hypothesize that the mother of all betrayals is about to go down. We hypothesize that Kikuyus will betray RUTO and it will be nasty. But before we tell you how it's going to happen, allow us to tell you about the kiss of death. Kiss of death, or bacio della morte in Italian, is a kiss given by a mafioso boss or a couple and signifies that a member of the crime family has been marked for death, usually as a result of some perceived betrayal. In the mafioso mobster film, The Valachi Papers, Vito Genovese gives the kiss of death to Joe Valachi to inform him that his betrayal of the family is known and that he will be executed. See, the thing with this kiss is that it's both a sign of affection and a sign of absolute terror. You just never know what it means. But should you have betrayed someone and you receive a kiss, chances are that you will be whacked. To a point here, William Ruto knows there is no way he will politically survive after betraying Uhuru. He knows that there are consequences. He's been receiving many kisses from Kikuyus, but he cannot differentiate which is the kiss of affection and which is the kiss of death. In our view, he has already received the kiss of death. The question is, who from? I have a clue for you. Who really thought that Moses KURIA, the president's member of parliament, left Kikuyus for RUTO? Who thought that Mwangi Kionjoli's Blue Band party wasn't a Trojan horse? But more fundamentally, if the Kikuyus begin leaving RUTO, who will give him political cover? Marcus Tullius, Cicero teaches us that a nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. RUTO has already received the case of political death. His political life is now on borrowed time.
Wow, wow, wow.
Indeed.
And today, I would like to talk about succession. I'd like us to reflect on the headline of the Sunday Nation and that of yesterday's Taifa Leo. The Nation on Sunday ran what, in my view, is the best headline of the year thus far. Is that it, then?
Yes.
Yesterday's Taifa Leo continued with the theme by asking, Mbona tusiwajaribu?
Yes.
Taifa Leo laid out all the unexpected candidates, the fringe candidates for the 2022 election, and made a case for each of them. The fourth estate, like the rest of us, are pondering over the Uhuru succession. And the dailies are saying two things to Kenyans. First, they are confirming to us that we as Kenyans are collectively experiencing political fatigue when it comes to career politicians in the race for president. We want novelty. Two, they are reminding Kenyans of the wise words of Solomon, that life is all about transitions. They are preparing us for what you call a lifequake come 2022. Lifequakes are transitions that fundamentally transform how we perceive ourselves and perceive our lives. They are events where we choose to transform our lives by making decisive changes and jumping into unknown territory. And they happen in one of two ways. So sometimes lifequakes are thrust upon us unexpectedly. Like when, not too long ago, Tanzania lost its president, Magufuli, overnight. Tanzania transitioned to a woman president, a Muslim president, a president from the island, not the mainland.
Yes.
As if that lifequake was not enough, they even have a vice president who has never ran for an elected position in his life.
Absolutely.
The man is a nominated MP who used to work for the World Bank in Washington, D.C. That is the earth-shattering lifequake currently underway in Tanzania as we speak. Alternatively, lifequakes are brought about after we experience a prolonged period of fatigue. And you know what? This second type are the best kind of lifequakes. These are the ones where we anticipate change, and so we mentally adjust ourselves to the transition, welcoming it on our own terms. So, what do we need to do between now and 2022 to adjust our mindsets for a Matiang'i presidency? Because let's be honest, the rest of the fringe candidates are non-starters. Three things we need to do. First, we need to keep our wounds green. As Sir Francis Bacon told us, a man who studieth revenge keeps his wounds green.
Yes.
We need to exact revenge on career politicians.
Yes.
You see, every election in Kenya has an object of aggression.
Yes.
Career politicians will be our scapegoats in 2022. They need to become our object of aggression.
Yes.
Two, think selfishly for once. Think first about yourself, your women, and your children. That one is for Kenyan men. Three, embrace that which is unpredictable. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Absolutely.
I like that.
I'll end it there.
Beautiful.
We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines: topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and thoughtful or just plain lazy.
I want to vote for the Daily Nation because Suluhu has done such an amazing job on her trip here.
I concur.
I concur.
Her and the president's chemistry.
Stop.
Top.
Yeah.
So we give the winning headline to the Daily Nation, and not to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Are they humorous or dry, satirical, pessimistic, or effective, or just plain lazy? Shall we begin with the standard?
Yeah, so we have a caricature of President of Somalia, Farmer Joe, and he's holding a piece of paper written presidential term extension, but on his forehead, which has been drawn rather exaggerated, it says rejected. And basically here is Somalia's parliament unanimously voted to cancel the 2-year extension that they had approved just a month ago.
Wow.
So yeah, interesting.
They found acres of space on his forehead.
Hey, but Gato, okay.
Okay, what do we have in the star?
Star, ozone, there is caricature of the beloved now, President Samia Suluhu. And she is elbowing, like, what's it called, fist elbow?
That's how they're greeting
That's how they're greeting each other.
A bump, an elbow bump.
Yes, with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Right next to them is William Ruto in a nice block. And the caption there is what frosty relationship. Yeah. I love it. I love
Uhuru
it.
has a new bestie in the region.
And she was so great today. I mean, she said, wale pamoja, wale wako pande hiyo wafanye biashara yao kwa uhuru na wale pande wetu wamepata suluhu ya kupata.
A good play on Wednesday.
And they were actually holding hands.
Yeah.
You know, William Ruto has a lot to learn from President Suluhu.
Yeah.
Wonderful. In the Daily Nation, we have a caricature here of Samia Suluhu with her bodyguards. They're about to enter Parliament, and one of the bodyguards is saying, "Your Excellency, that house has many questionable characters. Yes. Kindly mask up." Can you just please toss that one?
You know what, GM?
Why are you so pessimistic?
Do you know what the background of that place should have been? Should not have been Parliament. It should have been Karen.
Absolutely. Now, whom should we give our winning card?
I really like the star.
Let's do the star.
So the star gives us our winning card. And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what is our final thought?
Now, our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled How to Lose a Battle, Foolish Plans and Great Military Blunders by Bill Fawcett. Today's episode shall focus on the Six-Day War.
So the Six-Day War was a brief but bloody conflict fought in June of 1967 between Israel and the Arab states of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Before we get there, we should talk about the origins of the Six-Day War. So there's a well-known Arab-Israeli conflict that began in 1948 following disputes surrounding the founding of Israel. A coalition of Arab nations had launched a failed invasion of the nascent Jewish state as part of the First Arab-Israeli War. So this was 1948. Now this was pivotal, because Arab leaders were aggrieved by their military losses and the hundreds of thousands Palestinian refugees created by Israel's victory of that war in 1948. Then the second major conflict we see is in 1956 with the Suez Crisis. And this erupted when Israel, the United Kingdom and France staged a controversial attack on Egypt in response to Egyptian President Abdel Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal. Now it's still nationalized, and I think a couple of weeks ago a ship got stuck in the middle of the Suez Canal, and this brought about huge economic losses for Egypt. But that's another issue for another day. Then we see in April of 1967, tensions continue to rise. So the skirmishes have worsened, and Israel and Syria are fighting this ferocious air and artillery engagement in which 6 Syrian fighter jets are destroyed. This is April. Then on June 5th, 1967, now when the Six-Day War begins, Israeli Defense Forces initiate what they call Operation Focus, which is a coordinated aerial attack on Egypt. Now this attack was in the morning. 200 aircraft take off from Israel. They swoop west over the Mediterranean and they converge in the north of Egypt, and they literally eliminate almost 90% of the Egyptian Air Force, which just sat on the ground. Now, I won't go too much into the details of the actual war, but the idea here is to tell you about the legacy of the Six-Day War, what it has left in the wake of it. So the Six-Day War was momentous in basically catapulting what is known as the Arab-Israeli conflict. We have in August of 1967, so that same year, the Arab leaders meeting in Khartoum, Sudan, and signing a resolution that said no peace, no recognition, and no negotiation. But by this time, in 1967, we have, so later that year, we have Israel basically tripling its size. So it gained a lot of areas because of this war. So you have a situation where it claimed the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Sinai Peninsula, which it then returned in 1982, and it withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005, but it still has hold of the Golan Heights and the West Bank. And these continue to sort of have that conflict sustaining in that region. A few mysteries remain, and I'll end with that. What was Moscow or Russia doing when it falsely warned of a concentration of Israeli troops on the Syrian front in early May?
Yeah.
And precisely what led President Johnson, American president, to shift from trying to prevent the war to acquiescing an Israeli preemptive strike?
Yeah.
And thirdly, why did Abdel Nasser keep escalating the crisis when there was an obvious imbalance in military power?
Yeah.
So those are the few questions that...
Great questions.
Yeah.
But I say these clever, sneaky Russians, very, very clever, made an entire region go to war. But a little bit of history.
Yeah.
The current bad blood between the Arab nations and the Jews may not have been from biblical times, but may have been out of a friendship between Adolf Hitler and the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, a sultan of sorts known as Hajj Amin al-Husseini. You see al-Husseini and the Nazi boss Adolf Hitler. Hitler had actually promised the Arab leader that after securing a dominant military position in Europe, he would send the Nazi war machine into the Arab world under the guise of liberating the Arabs from British occupation. But 2 months later, the infamous 1C conference took place, in which the Nazis produced their plan to exterminate the Jews of Europe. While captured Nazi leaders were tried at Nuremberg, al-Husseini escaped and became the major force to bring Hitler's program of genocide to the Arab world. Returning to the Middle East, the Mufti ordered death to any Arab who opposed him, which served to groom his nephew, Muhammad Abdel Rahman al-Husseini, to instigate violence against the Jews and spread Nazi hatred throughout the Arab world. Muhammad Abdel Rahman al-Husseini later changed his name to Yasser Arafat.
Wow.
Yes, the famous Yasser Arafat, his uncle and Hitler were besties. Anyway, back to the 6-Day War. By the year 1960, a background of acceptance had been made for an all-Arab assault of the Jewish state of Israel. In fact, Egypt's then President Gamal Abdel Nasser once said that his country would never recognize the Jewish state, and the Arab nations shall not enter Palestine with its soil covered in sand. He said, we shall enter its soil saturated in blood. Arab leaders from Syria, Jordan, and Iraq followed the lead in preparation for a historic war, one that would finally eradicate the Jewish state. Rogue attacks grew more and more frequent, often from Syrian fire from the Golan Heights across the UN-sanctioned the demilitarized zone established to protect Israel from invasion. The Soviets, all this while, had been cleverly giving fake intel to the Arab coalition that Israel was mobilizing its military across its borders, as Gadoni said. But the intel was disinformation meant to destabilize the region in hopes of additional military sales.
Yes.
No longer waiting for the Israeli invasion, the Arab coalition was ready to attack Israel. Algerian, Saudi Arabian, Iraqi, and Kuwaiti armies set station the Egyptian, Syrian, and Jordanian front. Combined air force of about 810 planes, 2,800 tanks, nearly 500,000 troops prepared for the battle of all battles. While Jewish ethics requires mercy toward all, it demands vengeance and salvation from an enemy. In Deuteronomy, the Song of Hazzino reads, I will render vengeance to my enemies and will repay those who hate me. But in Psalms, the song goes even one step further. To execute vengeance upon the nations, to execute upon them the judgment written. It is an honor to all his pious ones. On June 4th, the cabinet held an emergency meeting, giving the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense the authority to do whatever was necessary to defend the state of Israel. The course was clear. Israel had no choice but a preemptive strike. The following morning, the Israeli Defense Force launched an offensive codenamed Moked, an English word for focus. And boy, wasn't it brutal. Jim, would you like to tell us how the Israeli did it?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me break down the doctrine of preemptive strikes. This is the only way you survive as a small nation, surrounded by enemies all around. Nothing beats good espionage followed by preemptive strikes. So the author tells us that led by General Yitzhak Rabin, the following dawn after the cabinet meeting, as you've correctly pointed out, the Israeli Defense Force launched an offensive on the coalition of Arabs. First, they hit Egypt. Within 2 hours, over 300 Egyptian bombers, combat planes, and helicopters were destroyed. Still on day one, the Israeli Air Force destroyed Jordan's military airfields in Amin and Mafraq, as well as most of the Jordanian combat fighters. To top it off, before dusk on day one, they proceeded to eliminate the Syrian and Iraqi air forces just for good measure. That was in the air. Whoa, ground. Israeli tank units gained one population center after the other. Israeli troops penetrated the Egyptian army along 3 main axes to reach the Suez Canal and the Gulf of Suez. They did that in just 4 days. By the 8th of June, IDF forces controlled the entire Sinai Peninsula. Here, the Israeli Air Force bombarded Syria's infantry battalions for 2 days and then launched a paratrooper assault from behind enemy lines backed by tanks. By the 10th of June, even the Syrian deployment collapsed and remaining troops were now in retreat. By the end of the 6th day, the war was over. It was a 3-stage offensive orchestrated with near perfect precision. In military terms, this is known as the enfeeblement strategy. That means taking the wind out of somebody's sails so as to undermine their position. And by applying this stratagem, you avoid meeting an opponent head-on, and instead you focus on sapping their material and spiritual strength. The whole idea with the approach of enfeeblement is to destroy conditions that are favorable to your opponent. To best understand the 6-Day War, watch episode 6 of 20th Century Battlefields that highlights conflict in the Middle East. It's done by Peter and Dan Snow. You can find it on YouTube.
JM, the enfeeblement strategy, if I'm saying it correctly, is in this strategy that is getting RUTO drowning?
I just knew RUTO was coming in.
It is. It's the one. Many strategies at play. So today we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Star. I'll leave you with a quote that sums up the doctrine of preemptive strikes by Thomas Fuller, the English historian. He said, "A man surprised is half beaten." Have a good night and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.